Hello, good morning, and welcome back to the Morning Bulletin here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host, Edward Kay. Joining me today is Jamie Findlater, and we're going to be going over, of course, Alexis Mac Allister, confirmed as a Liverpool player yesterday. The fee reported at about £35 million, obviously much, much lower than I think anybody was expecting Liverpool to be picking up a player of his quality for. First of all, I just wanted to ask you, Jamie, how big is it that Liverpool have managed to get someone over the line through the door in this sort of first week of the window and managed to get a midfielder in already?
It's massive, isn't it? I mean, the fact that they've managed to get that midfielder in, obviously all the problems they've had during the season, they've addressed it straight away. I mean, the window's not even officially open yet, so getting it over the line quickly, make sure that, over these next few weeks, Liverpool are in a position to go after even more targets. We know they do need more than the one signing in midfield, certainly. Probably need a defender as well. Jurgen Klopp said he's looking at, all areas across the pitch. So it kind of gives them that freedom to look everywhere. And, you touched upon that fee as well. I mean, you've got kind of makings of bargain of the summer already. In 35 million for a player who's already proven, already a World Cup winner, made a huge difference in that World Cup as well for Argentina, made a huge difference for Brighton as well in getting to Europe. So it's pretty much the perfect start to the summer for Liverpool.
Yeah, well, we'll focus on that fee. Obviously, a lot of debate surrounding how many players Liverpool need to get in midfield. A lot of people wanting three midfielders. I think some people would be happy with two and maybe a centre-back. But obviously, with the fee being so low, Jurgen Klopp's obviously got a bit of a war chest for the summer, and he's taken up much less of that on Mac Allister than I think anybody thought he would. So do you think this means that Liverpool might go and get two more midfielders and then maybe a centre-back or somewhere else on the pitch?
I think it depends on what Klopp's got in mind for next season and whether he's going to stick with this system that we saw at the end of last season. I mean, if he is going to stick with that and he thinks, well, Fabinho is going to stay in the side, I'm sticking by him. His performances did improve somewhat during that kind of running to the end of the season. You've got Fabinho, you've got Trent coming in alongside him in the attack. So then you're looking at the three in front and who's going to be part of that, or rather the two midfielders in front of them. So then you've got Mac Allister already in, possibility of Curtis Jones staying in the side, or whether they're going to look for another signing for, to go alongside Mac Allister in that kind of more advanced position, or whether he wants a backup or maybe a replacement for Fabinho. So whether he's going to go for a defensive midfielder or a sort of more number 8 type player, as Mac Allister might be. And then you're looking at defenders. I mean, I think it is pretty clear that they do need a defender. Just, if nothing else, just backup for Van Dijk and Konate, and hopefully somebody who can eventually, replace Van Dijk in the future once he's coming to the end of his career. So I think it does depend. I mean, we know Liverpool do have this war chest. I mean, they were going to go after Bellingham for a long time until kind of the season dictated that they needed more than the one signing. So they clearly do have a decent amount of money to go after signings, and the fact that they've got Mac Allister for what seems like such a cheap fee does mean that they're kind of freed up a bit to go after players.
Yeah, I think one of the things Jurgen Klopp was keen to emphasise yesterday, and a few people who have spoken to about Mac Allister have said this. While he is recognised for that sort of goal scoring contribution, I think he got 10 goals in the league for Brighton last season. And he's got a slight frame, but he is quite a physical player, and his defensive recovery numbers, I know the lads on Analysing Anfield have been saying, they're really good. And Jurgen Klopp said that this isn't just a technical number 10 sort of player. Like, this guy can really do it all. So how well do you expect him to fit in that Jurgen Klopp midfield?
I think when you look at him, he is the sort of ideal signing for Liverpool. I mean, he does work hard. He's not just an out-and-out number 10. He's not going to be maybe a more Coutinho type player who will kind of set up the attacks, but maybe won't do the same amount of work going backwards. He will do that, and we're seeing it for Brighton, and we're seeing it for Argentina during the World Cup. I mean, I think people forget that how much of a difference he actually made in that team. I mean, I think a lot of the focus went on Julian Alvarez, the kind of difference he made, but Mac Allister also came in after that first game, which Argentina lost against Saudi Arabia. They looked a bit shaky, especially in midfield. He came in, made a difference, and they went on and won the whole tournament. I mean, obviously there were a couple of performances maybe against like the Netherlands where they won on penalties, where they were perhaps a bit lucky, but at the same time, he just made a difference, and you can see what kind of difference he could make for Liverpool now. And it's the sort of player that they've been crying out for throughout the whole season.
Yeah, it really did make that difference for Argentina in the World Cup. But you touched on Curtis Jones and his position in the midfield. Obviously, he had a real resurgence towards the end of last season, playing sort of on the left of that midfield three. Mac Allister, I think a lot of people assuming that's sort of the side he's going to prefer to be on that left if, of course, Liverpool do go back to the 4-3-3. What are you expecting to sort of see out of Curtis Jones next season? Do you think he'll be a bit back down the pecking order again and sort of forced to fight his way back in? Or do you think there's a chance he starts the first game of the season still?
I think at this moment in time, you'd look at him as potentially starting the first game of the season. I mean, if we're going on current form and not looking at what could happen in pre-season, then he's in the team, and he's been one of the standout stars over this kind of running towards the end of the season. Whether further signings kind of dictates that he gets pushed down the pecking order again, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, we're talking about sort of Kephren Thuram. There's reports suggesting that maybe personal terms have been agreed there. So that might be another player to come into the midfield, maybe another player who goes up that pecking order, maybe overtakes Jones. We'll have to wait and see. But at this moment in time, I think you'd have to say he deserves another run in the team. Whether he gets it, we'll have to see how he does in pre-season. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp's going to have to make a decision on this system, whether he's sticking by it. It would seem that it's probably the right thing to do to stick by it, considering how well Liverpool did during the end of the season. So at this moment in time, yeah, why not give him a go?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really big season for Jones. I think a lot of people thought he'd sort of come of age a few years ago. Obviously, everyone remembers that goal against Everton at Anfield in the derby, but I think it's just not quite happened for him yet. And he had such a good end to last season. I think he can really sort of take that opportunity and kick on at the start of this season. But we'll move on to Kephren Thuram, who you mentioned. Some reports that Liverpool might have agreed personal terms last night. Not sure how much truth there is to those, but obviously he's definitely somebody Liverpool are going to be looking to get in this summer, I think. I wanted to get your thoughts on sort of his profile and his fit with Liverpool's midfield. Obviously, he's a very physical presence. Do you think he'd work well in a Jurgen Klopp midfield?
I think looking at him, I think he would. And you're looking at the sort of position he could play. I mean, he's another player who could play in various positions across midfield. Could be another one who, could fill that Fabinho role if Klopp does decide he wants to get another player in to replace Fabinho after the season he's had. Maybe he's seen a bit of a downturn in Fabinho that he wants to kind of address. But overall, you say he does look quite physical, and he looks like he would fit in quite well into that role. And yeah, it could be a good signing for Liverpool. And you look at, he was named in the team of the season over in France. That's a pretty good accolade, especially considering how often, we see PSG dominate that league. It says a lot about his persona and what he could bring.
Yeah, and I think him and Mac Allister obviously both bring in very different things. We mentioned Mac Allister does have a bit more of a slight frame, especially if you compare him to Thuram. When you look at Thuram, he's a seriously intimidating presence, 6'3", looks really good on the ball. Do you think him and Mac Allister would be good enough additions if they just left it at two midfielders?
I think it would depend on who else. I mean, who they sort of sign in for defence. Obviously, they're going to need someone. Whether Klopp decides, well, I think it's pretty clear that they do need a left-sided centre back, someone who's more natural on his left foot, and someone who could perhaps, fill that role if they want to give Robertson a rest. Especially if they decide that Tsimikas is going to be heading off this summer. So whether they get somebody for that position, someone who can fill that role. And then I think the two midfielders, assuming that they do get them in for those kind of more advanced roles in the system, whether they're sticking with Fabinho, whether Thuram fills that position, I think then you're looking at, if Thuram is going to fill the position of Fabinho, then maybe you do need to get another midfielder in just to cover, Curtis Jones and John Henderson. And 3 midfielders is probably the right number, but 2 could be done, especially if you're getting, especially with Mac Allister, the fee that they've paid for him. And then you're looking at Thuram, I think I've seen reports saying 55 million. Then you can start looking at, cheaper alternatives, just people who could act as backups. And 2 starting midfielders is probably a sound business, really.
Yeah, I think they definitely need to err on the side of caution and get 3 in, having left themselves so high and dry last season in that midfield area. But that was all we've got time for here on the Morning Bulletin today. So, Jamie, thanks for joining me, and for myself and Jamie, it's goodbye for now.